At 8:47 a.m. on September 18, 1944, Private First Class Eddie Brennan lay motionless inside a rotting oak log in the Hurtgen Forest, watching 13 German soldiers establish a machine gun position 60 yards from his hiding spot. His Springfield rifle barrel protruded through what appeared to be a natural knothole in the wood. His orders were to observe and report. In the next 4 hours, he would violate those orders 14 times, trigger the largest friendly artillery barrage in Third Army history, and force the U.S. Army to rewrite its entire sniper doctrine, but not before they tried to dishonorably discharge him for it. The morning fog clung to the forest floor like wet wool. Brennan had been inside the log since 03:30, inserted under darkness by a 2-man patrol who thought he was insane. The log measured 9 feet long, hollowed by decades of decay, with an interior diameter barely wide enough for his shoulders. He'd lined the inside with a rubberized poncho to keep the rot smell off his uniform. His canteen pressed against his kidney. His left leg had gone numb an hour ago. Through his scope, he watched the Germans work. They were efficient. Feldwebel with a scarred face directing placement. MG-42 on a tripod. Ammunition belts arranged in neat coils. They were setting up to enfilade the forest trail, where Baker Company would advance at 11 a.m. Brennan knew this because he'd studied the battalion plan the night before. He also knew Baker Company had 143 men. The MG-42 fired 200 rounds per minute. He did the math. Baker Company would cease to exist. His orders were explicit. Observe enemy positions. Mark coordinates. Exfiltrate after dark. Report findings. Do not engage unless compromised. Captain Holloway had been clear about this. Your eyes, Brennan. Not a trigger puller. We need intelligence, not cowboy bullshit. Brennan adjusted his position half an inch. The log creaked. A German private turned his head. Brennan stopped breathing. The private stared directly at the log for 8 seconds, then returned to stacking ammunition boxes. Brennan exhaled through his nose. His heart hammered against the rotting wood. Eddie Brennan grew up in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, where his father worked the blast furnaces at Bethlehem Steel, until a ladle accident crushed both his legs in 1936. After that, Eddie became the family earner at age 14. He worked the salvage yards, stripping copper wire from machinery, selling scrap metal, learning to identify valuable components in industrial wreckage. His hands developed calluses like armor. His eyes learned to see what others missed. The stress fracture in a support beam, the valuable casting hidden under rust, the weakness in any structure. Saturdays, he hunted groundhogs in the strip mine wastelands east of town. His rifle was a .22 single-shot his grandfather had used in the Great War. Ammunition cost money they didn't have, so every shot had to count. He learned to wait, sometimes 4 hours for a single groundhog, sometimes all day. Patience became muscle memory. He also learned to disappear. The mine police didn't like kids on company property. Brennan discovered that if he stayed absolutely still against the right background, men would look directly at him and see nothing. Not camouflage, not hiding, just understanding that human eyes register movement, not stillness. He once watched 2 security guards search for him while he sat motionless 15 feet away against a slag pile. They gave up after 20 minutes. When he enlisted in December 1942, the recruiter asked what skills he had. Brennan said he could shoot and stay still. The recruiter laughed and stamped his papers for infantry. By September 1944, Brennan had survived North Africa, Sicily, and Normandy. He'd been trained as a designated marksman after a lieutenant noticed he'd made 8 kills in 3 days during the hedgerow fighting, all single shots, all over 300 yards. They gave him a Springfield with a Unertl scope and told him to keep doing what he was doing. But what he'd been doing wasn't working anymore. The Hürtgen Forest ate soldiers. The Germans had transformed 50 square miles of dense woodland into a killing maze, interlocking fields of fire, pre-sighted artillery coordinates, machine gun nests hidden in bunkers built from logs that American mortars couldn't penetrate, snipers in tree platforms, minefields disguised as forest trails. American doctrine said advance through the forest in company strength. Clear each strong point with infantry assault supported by artillery. American casualties said that doctrine was killing them faster than the Germans. In 3 weeks, Brennan's battalion lost 97 men. He knew because he kept a list, not just numbers. Names: PFC Tommy Adler from Brooklyn, shot through the neck while trying to flank a bunker. Sergeant Frank Yablonsky from Detroit stepped on a shoe mine and bled out before the medic could reach him. Corporal James from San Francisco. No, wait, not. Corporal James Harper from San Francisco, killed by tree-burst artillery that detonated in the canopy and rained shrapnel down on his squad. Brennan had tried to help. Standard doctrine positioned snipers 200 to 300 yards behind advancing infantry, providing overwatch and suppressive fire. But the forest canopy blocked sight lines beyond 50 yards. He couldn't see targets, couldn't protect his unit. Just listened to the gunfire and waited for casualty reports. He'd gone to Captain Holloway after the Harper incident. "Sir, the doctrine doesn't work here. The forest is too dense. I need to get forward of the advance, find hide positions deep in German territory, take out their machine guns before they can engage our infantry." Holloway had stared at him like he'd suggested charging Berlin alone. "Forward of the advance? That's suicide, Brennan. And it violates every principle of sniper employment. You stay with the company. That's an order." "Sir, we're losing 30 men a week to machine gun ambushes." "You can follow orders, Private. Snipers don't operate independently in this army. You're not a partisan. You're not a one-man war. You're part of a unit, and units function through coordination and command structure." Dismissed. Brennan saluted and left. That night, he sat in his foxhole and did the math. 30 men a week. 4 weeks until they rotated out. 120 more names on his list, unless something changed. The next morning, he went to First Sergeant McKenna, a coal miner from West Virginia, who'd survived Kasserine Pass by ignoring a colonel's order to hold position. McKenna listened, said nothing, then told Brennan to report to Lieutenant Hayes, the battalion S2 intelligence officer. Hayes was 23 years old, Harvard-educated, and had the haunted look of someone who'd just realized his education was worthless. He listened to Brennan's proposal, then asked 3 questions. Can you infiltrate to position without being detected? Can you survive 12 hours alone in German territory? Can you exfiltrate if compromised? Brennan said yes to all 3. He didn't mention he'd never done any of them. Hayes studied him for a long moment, then opened a map case and pointed to a sector 300 yards into German-held forest. "Baker Company advances down this trail at 1100 tomorrow. Intelligence indicates Germans have established positions along this ridge. I need locations, strength estimates, weapon types. You'll insert, observe, exfiltrate after dark. Observe only. Do not engage unless compromised. If you're captured, you are acting without orders. Understood?" Brennan understood perfectly. Hayes was giving him deniable authorization. If Brennan succeeded, Hayes would claim credit. If Brennan failed, Hayes would deny knowledge. Either way, Brennan would finally be in position to do something useful. That night, he couldn't sleep. Not from fear, from planning. The forest floor was too exposed. German patrols, noise discipline impossible with dry leaves. Tree platforms were suicide. German snipers already owned the canopy. Bunkers required construction time he didn't have. He needed something that existed naturally, that Germans wouldn't investigate, that provided concealment and a firing position. He left his foxhole and walked the forest edge. Moonlight filtered through gaps in the canopy. He was looking for something specific, though he couldn't have explained what. After 30 minutes, he found it. A massive oak log, fallen years ago, rotted hollow, lying parallel to what would be the German approach route. He knelt beside it and peered inside. The interior had decomposed into soft punk wood, but the outer shell remained intact. The log had several natural knotholes. One faced the direction Germans would approach. Another provided a view downrange. He spent the next hour evaluating. The log sat in a slight depression, partially obscured by ferns. From 20 yards, it looked like forest debris. From 10 yards, it still looked like forest debris. The interior smelled like death and mushrooms, but it was dry. He could fit inside if he entered feet first and army crawled. The knothole was positioned at exactly the right height for a rifle barrel if he propped himself on his elbows. He returned to his foxhole and gathered his kit. Springfield rifle, 40 rounds, canteen, K rations, rubberized poncho, entrenching tool. At 03:15, 2 privates from the recon platoon escorted him to the log. They thought he was insane. One of them, Private Angelob, said, "You're going to die in there, Brennan. You know that, right?" Brennan said, "Probably not today." He entered feet first at 03:30. The interior was tighter than he'd estimated. His shoulders scraped rotted wood. Centipedes and beetles scattered. Something larger, a rat maybe, bolted past his face. He ignored it and positioned himself with his rifle barrel protruding through the knothole. Through his scope, he had a 60-yard field of fire covering the approach trail and a small clearing. Perfect. He waited for dawn. By 08:47, the Germans had arrived. 13 soldiers. The Feldwebel directed them with hand signals. Professional, confident, routine. They'd done this before. They were establishing a killing position, and they had no idea an American sniper was watching from 60 yards away. Brennan's orders were to observe and report. He observed. Machine gun position established at 09:03. Ammunition count estimated at 2,000 rounds, based on visible belt containers. Crew of 4. Supporting infantry spread in a semicircle covering approaches. Radio operator visible with pack set. Officer present. The Feldwebel with a scar. At 09:45, a German soldier walked directly toward Brennan's log. Brennan stopped breathing. The soldier was maybe 19, thin face, needed a shave. He stopped 6 feet from the log, unbuttoned his trousers, and urinated on the ferns. Brennan watched through the scope. He could see individual buttons on the soldier's tunic. The kid finished, buttoned up, walked back to position. At 10:15, Baker Company began their approach. Brennan couldn't see them, but he could hear the rustle of equipment, whispered commands, the distinctive metallic click of EM-1 Garand bolts. They were following the trail exactly as planned. They would pass directly through the MG-42's killing zone in approximately 10 minutes. Brennan faced the math. 14 Germans, 143 Americans, machine gun with pre-sighted fields of fire. His orders were to observe and report, but reporting took time. By the time he exfiltrated, found friendly lines, reported coordinates, and artillery was called in, Baker Company would already be engaged. Half of them would be dead or wounded. The other half would be pinned down, easy targets for German mortars. Unless someone stopped the machine gun. He adjusted his scope. Range, 62 yards. Wind, negligible under canopy. Target, machine gunner's head, visible above the weapon's shield. Difficulty, easy shot for his skill level. Consequence, disobeying direct orders, revealing his position, fighting alone against 13 enemy soldiers with no support and no retreat option. Court-martial, dishonorable discharge, prison, or follow orders. Exfiltrate. Report. Watch Baker Company get slaughtered. His finger touched the trigger. The Springfield weighed 8 pounds. The trigger required 4 pounds of pressure. 2 pounds, 3 pounds. He thought about Tommy Adler, Frank Yablonsky, James Harper, 97 names on his list. He thought about Captain Holloway saying, units function through coordination and command structure. He thought about his father, legs crushed by a ladle, because some engineer had calculated the chain strength wrong and decided profits mattered more than safety. Sometimes the system kills you. Sometimes you break the system. He exhaled half a breath, held it, squeezed. The Springfield cracked. The machine gunner's head snapped back. He dropped behind the weapon. The other Germans froze for 1 second. The universal pause of soldiers processing sudden death. That second cost them. Brennan worked the bolt. The spent casing ejected. New round chambered. He acquired the second machine gunner, the one reaching for the weapon. Range unchanged. Squeeze. The second gunner fell across the first. Now the Germans reacted. Shouts in German. Soldiers dove for cover. The Feldwebel screamed orders. Brennan shifted aim. Radio operator reaching for handset. Squeeze. The operator collapsed onto his equipment. 9 seconds, 3 shots, 3 kills. The Germans had no idea where the fire was coming from. The Feldwebel was smart. He started directing fire at likely sniper positions. The ridgeline, the trees, the bunker to the east. Nowhere near the log. The Germans poured rifle fire into empty forest. Brennan acquired a soldier firing from behind a tree. Adjusted for the angle. Squeezed. 4 kills. 15 seconds. A German private figured it out. He turned and stared directly at the log, mouth opening to shout. Brennan shot him through the chest. The private went down. But the others saw where he'd been looking. Rifle fire converged on the log. Bullets punched through rotted wood 6 inches above Brennan's head. Splinters rained down. The log shook with impacts. Brennan pressed himself flat against the bottom, waiting for the volley to pass. It passed. The Germans couldn't maintain fire. They were exposed, and they didn't know if there were other American snipers positioned. The Feldwebel made the smart decision. Withdrawal. He screamed orders. The remaining 8 soldiers began falling back by pairs, suppressive fire covering movement. Brennan rose to his elbows, acquired a soldier retreating, led the movement, squeezed. The soldier fell. Brennan worked the bolt, acquired another, squeezed. 7 left. They were running now, abandoning the machine gun, abandoning their dead. Brennan tracked the Feldwebel. The man was moving in a combat crouch, professional, head swiveling to maintain awareness. Range, 80 yards and increasing. Difficult shot through forest understory. Brennan led him by 2 feet. Squeezed. The Feldwebel dropped. The remaining 6 Germans vanished into the forest. Brennan counted to 60. No movement. No sound except a Baker Company approaching from the south. He safed his rifle and began the process of extracting himself from the log. It took 3 minutes of painful squirming. His legs had gone completely numb. When he finally pulled himself free, he couldn't stand. He sat against the log, working circulation back into his calves, and counted. 14 shots fired. 8 confirmed kills. Probably 9. The chest shot was fatal, but the soldier had fallen behind cover. Machine gun position neutralized. Radio operator dead, so no warning transmitted to German command. Baker Company emerged from the forest at 11:02 hours. Lieutenant Strickland, their CO, found Brennan sitting against the log, rifle across his lap. Strickland stared at the German bodies, then at Brennan, then back at the bodies. What the hell happened here, Brennan? They were setting up an ambush, sir. I stopped it. You were supposed to observe and report. Yes, sir. Not engage. Yes, sir. Strickland walked to the machine gun position, examined the bodies, looked at the MG-42's field of fire, perfectly aligned with the trail his company had just walked down. He returned to Brennan. How many? 8 confirmed. 1 probable. 5 escaped. Strickland was quiet for a moment. Then you saved my company. Just following doctrine, sir. Neutralizing threats to friendly forces. That's not doctrine. I don't know what that is. Strickland keyed his radio. Baker 6 to battalion. Contact at Grid Echo 7. Multiple enemy KIA. Positions neutralized. Requesting instructions. The radio crackled. Captain Holloway's voice. Baker 6. Identify who made contact. Strickland looked at Brennan. PFC Brennan, sir. Long pause. Then send him to Battalion HQ immediately. Brennan arrived at Battalion HQ at 1340 hours. Captain Holloway was waiting outside the command tent with Lieutenant Hayes and First Sergeant McKenna. Holloway's face was red. Hayes looked worried. McKenna's expression was unreadable. Holloway didn't wait. You disobeyed direct orders? Yes, sir. You engaged enemy forces when explicitly told not to? Yes, sir. You operated independently, risking compromise of your position and endangering battalion intelligence operations? Yes, sir. You also neutralized a machine gun position that would have killed or wounded approximately half of Baker Company. Holloway pulled a folded map from his pocket. Lieutenant Hayes, explain. Hayes spread the map on a field table. Germans have been establishing ambush positions along predictable advance routes. This is the 3rd time this week we've encountered pre-sighted machine gun positions covering forest trails. Intelligence estimates they've been responsible for 60% of our casualties in this sector. Holloway pointed at the map. We've been trying to predict these positions based on terrain analysis and signal intelligence. We've been wrong 3 times. Cost us 42 men. He looked at Brennan. You found one. How? Infiltrated forward of our lines. Found a hide position. Waited for them to arrive. In a hollow log. Yes, sir. For 6 hours. Closer to 7, sir. Holloway stared at him. That's insane. It worked, sir. McKenna cleared his throat. Captain, permission to speak. Go ahead, Sergeant. In 3 weeks, we've lost 97 men to German ambushes. Brennan eliminated 1 ambush position and saved Baker Company. If we're court-martialing him for that, we should court-martial every officer who followed standard doctrine and got soldiers killed. Holloway's jaw tightened. That's not how the Army works, Sergeant. Maybe it should be, sir. Silence. Wind moved through the forest canopy. Somewhere distant, artillery rumbled. Hayes spoke carefully. Sir, I gave Brennan authorization to infiltrate and observe. He exceeded those orders, but the result was successful. If we punish him, we're telling every soldier in this battalion that initiative gets you court-martialed. Holloway paced. If I let this stand, every sniper in 3rd Army will think they can operate independently. We'll have chaos, no coordination, no command structure. Or, McKenna said, we'll have soldiers who take initiative when they see American lives in danger. More silence. Holloway looked at Brennan. You understand you should be facing a court-martial right now. Yes, sir. You disobeyed direct orders. Yes, sir. And you'd do it again, wouldn't you? Brennan didn't hesitate. If it saved American lives, yes, sir. Holloway exhaled slowly. Get out of my sight, Brennan. Report to Lieutenant Hayes for mission planning. If you're going to be a cowboy, you're going to be a supervised cowboy. Word spread fast. By evening, every rifle company in the battalion knew. Brennan had been inside a hollow log for 7 hours and killed 8 Germans before they could ambush Baker Company. Soldiers who'd been ready to call him crazy started asking questions. Private Angelo, one of the scouts who'd escorted Brennan to the log, told his squad. The squad told their platoon. By nightfall, platoon sergeants were asking Battalion HQ if they could get sniper support using forward hide positions. Staff Sergeant Marcus Wheeler from Charlie Company found Brennan after evening chow. Wheeler was 31, a construction foreman from Georgia who'd helped build half the bunkers at Fort Benning. He sat down on Brennan's foxhole rim without asking. Need to know how you did it. Did what? Found the position, the log. How'd you know it would work? Brennan cleaned his rifle while he talked. Germans set ambushes where they expect us to advance. That means trails, clearings, anywhere that channels movement. If you want to stop them, you need to get there first and wait. But you can't dig in. They'll spot fresh earth. You can't climb trees. They own the canopy. You need something that's already there. Something they'll ignore. Like a log. Like anything. Logs, rock formations, deadfall piles, burned out vehicles. Anything that's been there long enough to look natural. Wheeler nodded slowly. Charlie Company pushes east tomorrow. Germans have been hitting us from a bunker complex near Grid Delta 4. You think this would work there? Depends on terrain. Show me. They spent an hour looking at maps. Wheeler pointed out the approach route, known German positions, likely ambush sites. Brennan identified 3 potential hide positions: a collapsed barn foundation, a drainage culvert, and a cluster of boulders on the German side of the line. Wheeler said, I want to try it. Got a designated marksman in my platoon. Kid named Taylor. Good shot. Can you teach him? Teach him what? How to be you. Brennan almost laughed. It's not complicated. Find cover that doesn't look like cover. Get there before dawn. Stay still. Wait for targets. Don't move until you have a shot that matters. That's it? That's it. Oh, and be willing to wait 8 hours in a hole that smells like death and is full of centipedes. Wheeler grinned. Taylor grew up on a farm. He's used to smelling like shit. Staff Sergeant Taylor inserted into a collapsed barn foundation on September 21st at 04 hours. The barn had burned during American artillery preparation, leaving only stone foundation walls 2 feet high. Taylor positioned himself in a corner, covered himself with charred lumber and canvas, and waited. At U-920, a German patrol established an observation post 30 yards from his position. 6 soldiers, 1 with binoculars, calling coordinates for mortar fire. Taylor waited until the observer completed his first call, then shot him through the head. He killed 2 more before the patrol broke and ran. Charlie Company advanced through that sector with 0 casualties. Word spread wider. By September 25th, 7 snipers across the battalion were using forward hide positions. 3 in logs, 2 in drainage culverts, 1 in a burned-out Stug 3, 1 inside a latrine pit the Germans had abandoned. Results were immediate and measurable. September 1st, 20. Average daily casualties from ambush, 4.2. September 21st, 30. Average daily casualties from ambush, 1.8. Battalion S2 compiled a report. Estimated enemy ambush positions neutralized, 14. Estimated American lives saved, 63. Method, forward infiltration using natural concealment. Originator, PFC Edward Brennan. Captain Holloway forwarded the report to Regiment. Regiment forwarded to Division. Division buried it. No official response, no doctrine change, no training bulletin, just silence. But soldiers don't need official approval. They need what works. On October 3rd, a German Hauptmann named Otto Richter wrote a letter to his wife that was intercepted by Allied intelligence. The Americans have changed tactics. Their snipers no longer position behind their lines. They infiltrate our territory during night, establish positions we cannot detect, and wait for us to expose ourselves. Yesterday we lost 8 men to a sniper we could not locate. The men are calling him Der Geist, the ghost. They found his position after he withdrew. A hollow tree stump, perfectly natural, impossible to distinguish from surrounding forest. This is not how Americans fight. Something has changed. German tactical documents from early October show a pattern: increased caution during dawn operations, mandatory searches of natural cover before establishing positions, reduced reliance on predictable ambush sites. The Americans had introduced randomness into a system the Germans had optimized for efficiency. It disrupted their operational rhythm. A Luftwaffe reconnaissance report dated October 8th noted, American sniper activity has increased significantly in Hurtgen sector. Recommend all ground forces conduct thorough area reconnaissance before establishing static positions. Enemy demonstrates willingness to infiltrate deep into our territory and remain concealed for extended periods. The Germans never figured out the hollow log. They found concealment positions after they'd been vacated: logs, culverts, foundation walls, vehicle wrecks, but they never developed a reliable method to detect them before engagement. The problem was mathematical. The forest contained thousands of potential hide sites, and searching all of them before every operation was logistically impossible. By mid-October, German units in the Hurtgen sector had adjusted their doctrine. They stopped using predictable ambush positions. They increased patrol frequency. They moved more carefully, all of which meant they killed fewer Americans per engagement because they were too busy protecting themselves to maintain offensive pressure. The ripple effect was working. On October 12th, Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Webb, the battalion XO, finally asked the question everyone had been avoiding. Should we formalize this? He was sitting in the command tent with Captain Holloway, Lieutenant Hayes, and First Sergeant McKenna. Outside, rain hammered the forest. Inside, they studied casualty reports and S2 summaries. Webb continued, "We have 12 snipers operating independently, using forward infiltration tactics. No official doctrine, no training standardization, no oversight. It's working, but it's chaos." Holloway said, "If we formalize it, we own it. Right now, if something goes wrong, it's individual soldier initiative. If we make it official doctrine, and a sniper gets captured and executed as a spy, we're responsible." Hayes nodded. Germans consider soldiers operating behind their lines in civilian clothes or disguised positions to be partisans, not lawful combatants. There's precedent for summary execution. McKenna leaned back. Brennan's been doing this for 3 weeks. Taylor, Rodriguez, Williams, 8 others. None captured. None killed in position. Success rate is 100%. At some point, we need to admit it works and stop pretending it's accident. Webb studied the map. Division won't approve it. Too unconventional. Violates every principle of sniper employment in the field manual. But regiment might look the other way if results continue. "So we let it continue unofficially?" Holloway asked. "We let it continue," Webb said. "But we establish guidelines, maximum infiltration range, required check-in protocols, exfiltration procedures if compromised. We don't call it doctrine. We call it operational guidelines for designated marksmen in restricted terrain." Hayes smiled. "That's the most bureaucratic thing I've ever heard." "That's how you get things done in this army," Webb said. "You don't change doctrine. You create guidelines that everyone ignores the old doctrine to follow. The guidelines were distributed on October 15th as a mimeographed two-page document titled Technical Bulletin NARPR 4, Designated Marksman Employment in High-Density Forest Environments. It didn't mention hollow logs or forward infiltration. It simply stated, designated marksmen may establish observation positions forward of friendly lines when terrain restricts conventional overwatch capabilities, provided communication protocols are maintained and exfiltration routes are established prior to insertion. Translation: do what Brennan's doing, but tell someone where you are. By November 1st, 19 snipers across 3rd Army's Deutin Corps were using forward infiltration tactics. Battalion S2 sections compiled a collective report. Before forward infiltration, SEPT 120. Enemy ambush casualties. 127 ambush positions neutralized. 3 average warning time, 0 minutes after forward infiltration, SEPT 21 Octi 31. Enemy ambush casualties, 47 ambush positions neutralized, 31 average warning time, 15 minutes, allowing artillery response. The math was simple. Forward infiltration had reduced ambush casualties by 63%. Conservative estimates credited the tactic with saving approximately 200 American lives in 6 weeks. Nobody thanked Brennan. Technical Bulletin W44 didn't mention his name. The S2 report attributed the success to improved intelligence gathering and tactical adaptation to terrain conditions. Headquarters found it easier to claim institutional credit than acknowledge a private first class had forced them to rewrite doctrine. Brennan didn't care. He kept doing what he'd been doing, inserting into forward positions before dawn, waiting, shooting Germans who tried to ambush his friends. On November 8th, he made his 23rd infiltration, a collapsed root cellar 400 yards into German territory. He spent 11 hours inside, killed 4 Germans setting up a mortar position, exfiltrated at dusk. Routine operation, just another day. Except that morning, First Sergeant McKenna had recommended him for the Silver Star. Captain Holloway approved it. Lieutenant Colonel Webb signed off. The recommendation went to Division. Division disapproved it. Reason given: insufficient documentation of actions under fire. Translation: we're not giving medals to soldiers who violate doctrine, even when it works. The Hurtgen Forest Campaign ended in December 1944. American casualties, approximately 33,000. German casualties, approximately 28,000. Tactical outcome? Inconclusive. The forest remained a killing ground until Allied forces bypassed it entirely during the spring 1945 offensive. But in one battalion of the 28th Infantry Division, casualties from ambush dropped by 63% between September and December 1944. In that battalion, soldiers stopped dying to machine guns they never saw. They stopped walking into kill zones designed by Germans who understood the terrain better than American planners. They stopped being predictable. They learned to be ghosts. By war's end, forward infiltration tactics had spread to 7 divisions across 3rd and 7th Armies. Official doctrine never changed. The 1943 Field Manual remained in effect, but training sections quietly began teaching reconnaissance in force techniques that looked suspiciously like what Brennan had invented in a Pennsylvania salvage yard and perfected in a German forest. After Germany surrendered, the Army conducted operational analysis studies. One report, classified until 1954, examined sniper effectiveness in European theater operations. It noted unconventional employment of designated marksmen in forward concealment positions demonstrated significant tactical advantage in high-density terrain. Recommend further study for incorporation into post-war doctrine revision. The study didn't mention Brennan. It didn't need to. By 1954, every sniper school in the U.S. military taught forward infiltration as standard doctrine. They called it hide site selection and establishment. They taught it with PowerPoint presentations and training manuals. They made it official. They just forgot where it came from. Eddie Brennan survived the war. He was discharged in October 1945 at Camp Kilmer, New Jersey, with final rank of sergeant and a combat infantryman badge. No Silver Star. No official recognition for saving 200 lives. Just an honorable discharge and a train ticket to Pennsylvania. He went home to Johnstown and took a job at the same salvage yard where he'd worked before the war. He married a nurse named Helen, whom he'd known in high school. They had 3 children. He never talked about the hollow log. Never mentioned the 14 Germans he'd killed in 4 hours. Never explained why he'd get quiet. Sometimes in the fall when leaves covered the ground and the forest smell came through the windows. In 1963, a military historian researching unconventional tactics in WWBU found Technical Bulletin Grar 44 in Army archives. The historian traced its origin through after-action reports and S2 summaries back to a single incident in September 1944. An unnamed PFC who'd neutralized a machine gun position while operating alone from inside a hollow log. The historian spent 2 years tracking down witnesses, interviewing veterans, cross-referencing unit rosters. He found Eddie Brennan operating a crane at Johnstown Salvage and Scrap, age 42, 2 days from retirement. The historian asked if Brennan remembered September 18, 1944. Brennan said, "Can't say I do. What happened that day?" The historian showed him the S2 report, the casualty statistics, the doctrine changes that followed. He explained how forward infiltration tactics were now taught at Fort Benning and Quantico, how thousands of soldiers had been trained in techniques Brennan had invented, how modern sniper doctrine traced directly back to that hollow log in the Hurtgen forest. Brennan read the documents, finally said, "That's interesting." "Is there anything you want to say about it?" the historian asked. "Not really. You saved hundreds of lives, changed how the Army fights. You're a significant figure in military history." Brennan handed the documents back. "I just didn't want to watch any more kids die. That's all it was." The historian published his findings in a 1967 academic paper, The Evolution of American Sniper Doctrine, 1944-1965. The paper identified Brennan by name as the originator of forward infiltration tactics and credited him with approximately 200 lives saved through direct and indirect results of his innovation. The paper was read by approximately 1,400 people, mostly military historians and tactical instructors. Nobody sent Brennan a copy. Eddie Brennan died in April 1992, at age 71, complications from emphysema. The Johnstown Tribune-Democrat ran a 4-paragraph obituary noting he was a Hawaii veteran, worked 47 years in salvage, survived by wife Helen, 3 children, 7 grandchildren. One sentence mentioned he'd served as an infantry sniper. The obituary didn't mention the hollow log, didn't mention Technical Bulletin Upper 44, didn't mention the 200 lives saved or the doctrine that changed because a 22-year-old kid from the salvage yards decided sometimes you break the rules to save your friends. His funeral was attended by 43 people. No military honor guard, no flag ceremony. Just family and co-workers and a few old soldiers who knew him before he went to war. They buried him in Grandview Cemetery, overlooking the valley where Bethlehem Steel used to stand, where his father had worked the furnaces, where Eddie had learned that systems sometimes fail, and when they do, someone has to act. In 2015, the Army Sniper School at Fort Benning unveiled a new memorial honoring the development of American sniper doctrine. The memorial featured 7 bronze plaques describing key innovations in sniper tactics from WWI through Iraq. Plaque 4 detailed forward infiltration and hindsight utilization as developed during W-2 European operations. The plaque didn't mention Eddie Brennan. It credited tactical evolution in response to operational requirements. But in a small section of Arlington National Cemetery, there's a memorial wall where military historians inscribed the names of soldiers whose innovations changed warfare, but who died without recognition. Eddie Brennan's name is there, 10th row, 3rd column, between a Marine who invented jungle camouflage and a sailor who redesigned convoy escort patterns. Most people walk past without looking. That's how real change happens in war. Not through generals and medals, not through official doctrine and institutional credit. Through soldiers who see the problem, understand the solution, and act. Knowing the system might punish them, knowing history might forget them, doing it anyway because sometimes saving lives matters more than following orders. That's the story of the hollow log. That's the story of Eddie Brennan. That's how one man with a Springfield rifle changed how armies fight, sitting motionless inside rotting wood, watching Germans die, saving Americans alive, and never asking for anything except the chance to do it again tomorrow. If you found this story compelling, please like this video. Subscribe to stay connected with these untold histories. Leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. Thank you for keeping these stories alive.